For years, whispers followed Meghan Markle, but none as unsettling as the one resurfacing now. According to Tom Bauer, the polished public image the world was shown, the glowing Hollywood actress who suddenly became a duchess, didn't match the story written in the records. Somewhere between California sunshine and royal palace gates, the years appeared to shift. And when Thomas Markle, her own father, spoke about his daughter's early life, the contradictions didn't just grow, they sharpened. This wasn't internet noise. It wasn't fan speculation. These were details emerging from people who actually lived alongside her, raised her, taught her, or documented her. And if even half of their recollections are correct, Meghan might not be the age the world was told. The elegant duchess introduced at 36 could have been stepping into royal life already in her 40s. When most fathers talk about their daughters, they offer nostalgia. But Thomas Markle's reflections carried something different, a weight, almost like a man trying to correct an official biography that had drifted too far from reality. He spoke about school years, childhood milestones, theater rehearsals, and early ambitions, but the way those memories aligned didn't match the public timeline his daughter later shared. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't attack. He simply recited moments, dates, and ages the way a parent remembers them, from lived experience, not curated branding. And when he suggested that the woman he raised didn't quite match the age portrayed by Palace PR, the first cracks began to form. Then came the paper trail. The year was 1997. Teenagers across America were flipping through 17 magazine, dreaming of college applications, careers, and the future. Buried inside that issue was a simple list of young women with short descriptions. One entry caught researchers' attention: Meghan Markle, age 21. On its own, it seems unremarkable, another aspiring face in a magazine. But then the math enters the room like a ghost. If Meghan was born in August 1981, as she has always claimed, then in March 1997 she would have been 15, not 21. The difference? 6 entire years. Not a typo. Not a typo repeated across the page. It was printed, distributed, archived, and left untouched for decades, and because this magazine predates her fame, predates royal life, predates strategic PR, it becomes harder to dismiss. If the magazine record is accurate, the timeline of her life isn't just blurry, it shifts dramatically. Her graduation year, her Hollywood debut, her late 20s actress on the rise image, all start moving backward. This is where the two versions of her life stand side by side like mismatched photographs. Version 1, the official biography. Meghan Markle, born August 4, 1981. That would make her 44 in 2025. Version 2, the archived magazine entry. Meghan Markle, age 21 in 1997. That would place her birth around 1975-1976. A 6-year difference is not a rounding error. It changes everything: how old she was when she started acting, when she first married, and how old she truly was when she entered the royal family. And then comes the next question, the one even skeptics hesitate to ask out loud. If the timeline is shifted, how does it affect the pregnancies? According to Tom Bauer, the story Prince Harry told in his memoir painted a serene, almost cinematic portrayal of Archie's birth: dim lights, calm voices, and a graceful exit just 2 hours after delivery. But a Portland hospital medical insider stepped forward, saying the published account didn't align with how births, especially high-risk births, are handled. Epidurals don't work the way Harry described. 2 epidurals back-to-back isn't standard practice. Observational monitoring isn't optional. And no mother is discharged an hour after labor, not after anesthesia, not after blood pressure fluctuations. Not when medical guidelines require mandatory monitoring. The drive alone from Portland Hospital to Frogmore Cottage takes nearly an hour, meaning that if they truly returned home within 2 hours, the birth, the recovery, the stabilization of vitals, and the discharge all had to occur in roughly 60 minutes. Nobody familiar with childbirth buys that timeline. And then comes the most glaring medical flag: the classification of a geriatric pregnancy. Any expectant mother over 35 receives that designation, not as an insult but as a risk category requiring careful supervision. Meghan herself has openly referenced high blood pressure concerns, a red flag for conditions like preeclampsia. One of the most dangerous complications a mother can face, the insider insisted. Mothers flagged as high risk do not get spa-like births. They don't get candlelit rooms. They don't get free movement between tubs and birthing balls. They get machines, sensors, constant checks, and medical teams ready for emergencies. So, if the official story doesn't match the medical reality, and the paper trail doesn't match the public age, what does that leave? A theater. A polished version. A curated narrative, because when a royal image depends on flawlessness, the messy parts tend to get edited out. And the more you examine these edits, the more the story begins to feel like it was written with pencil, erasable, adjustable. Designed for the spotlight rather than the record books, and once you tilt the page, the erased lines become impossible to ignore. As researchers dug deeper into the inconsistencies surrounding Meghan Markle's story, a strange pattern began to emerge. Each part of her narrative looked polished, precise, and perfectly timed. Yet the supporting details around it dissolved the moment you held them up to the light. It wasn't one contradiction, or even two. It was a slow build, like threads quietly slipping out of place until the entire fabric no longer matched the design. The most striking inconsistencies came from the birth of Archie. Because unlike image, age, or background, childbirth leaves a physical timeline. Hospitals follow protocol. Births involve charts, medications, vitals, and recovery windows. These are things even the most skilled PR team can't bend without risking credibility. And yet when Prince Harry described the experience in his memoir, it read more like a carefully framed memory than a medical event. He wrote about soft lighting, wellness center calm, and an almost spa-like sense of peace, as if the outside world didn't exist beyond the hospital walls. But anyone who has delivered a child, especially at a hospital known for strict procedure, knows childbirth doesn't follow aesthetic preferences. When epidurals are administered, they are continuous. When complications exist, movement is restricted. When blood pressure rises, monitoring becomes constant. That's why the insider from Portland Hospital immediately questioned the account. They explained that a patient flagged as high risk isn't placed in flexible birthing environments. No tubs. No ball exercises. No scented candles. Those are luxuries found in low risk, midwife-led births, not in cases involving intense monitoring or potential medical complications. And that raised an even bigger question. If the official story was so far from protocol, why craft it in the first place? The insider insisted that mothers in high-risk categories, especially those experiencing symptoms resembling preeclampsia, would never be discharged in 1 or 2 hours. Even under the most ideal conditions, mothers are monitored for several hours after an epidural to ensure mobility returns and vitals stabilize. For a patient with elevated blood pressure, the observation window increases significantly. So the timeline Harry described didn't just sound idealized, it sounded impossible. Then came another detail few noticed: the secrecy surrounding the delivery itself. There were no typical hospital photos, no staff sightings, no official confirmation of who was present in the room. Everything was sealed, private, regulated. And privacy is not unusual for royals, but the degree of silence surrounding this particular birth felt unlike any other modern royal event. According to Tom Bower, this wasn't accidental. He believed the story was curated, shaped to match the royal fairy tale aesthetic, even if that meant bending reality. And when you tilt the entire timeline, from the magazine age listing to the graduation discrepancies, to the pregnancy contradictions, the image begins to look less like biography and more like screenplay. But the mystery doesn't end with Archie. Questions resurfaced again with Lilibet's birth. The palace offered an announcement, photos months later, and carefully controlled releases, but many noticed the emotional tone was different, more guarded, less open. When a family rooted in centuries-old tradition suddenly shields typical milestones with extreme caution, people wonder whether something behind the scenes has shifted, and that shift circles back to the age debate. If Meghan were several years older than publicly stated, those pregnancies would be categorized at even higher risk. Yet the stories presented were near flawless, fast recoveries, serene experiences, almost cinematic timing. The more perfect the stories sounded, the more unbelievable they became. That's when analysts returned to the origin of the contradiction, the identity timeline. 2 narratives. 2 birth years. 2 versions of the same woman. 1 version widely accepted by royal historians, journalists, and fans of Meghan, born in 1981, forging her path through Hollywood before stepping into royal life at 36. Another version quietly preserved in old magazines, old school mentions, and recollections from people who knew her before the spotlight. Meghan possibly born in the mid-70s, presenting herself differently as she pursued an industry where age could close doors before talent even gets a chance. In Hollywood, age isn't just a number, it's currency. And when an actress is trying to secure roles, especially in her early career, shaving a few years isn't unheard of. But when the same actress becomes a duchess, the story takes on a whole new level of scrutiny. That's where Thomas Markle's quiet warnings echo again. He didn't accuse. He didn't fight. He simply recalled details that didn't match the official narrative, as though he sensed history shifting around him. And perhaps he understood something most people overlook: stories crafted for public acceptance are often written in pencil, not ink. When you erase enough times, faint lines remain, and those faint lines are what Tom Bower followed: old magazine clippings, archived documents, offhand remarks from teachers and former colleagues, the way certain memories didn't match certain birthdays. None of it proves anything definitively, But the contradictions form a pattern strong enough to question, and once the pattern appears, the bigger question emerges: if the story of age, biography, and birth required this much smoothing, what else was curated? Public image? Family dynamics? Royal tensions? When narratives begin to look too perfect, too polished, too controlled, they lose the messy authenticity that marks real life. And the more polished they are, the more the truth demands to be found beneath them. In the end, the debate around Meghan's age isn't just about numbers. It's about identity. It's about which version of her life belongs to the public record, and which version was reshaped to fit a royal mold, because once a story is rewritten enough times, it becomes impossible to tell whether the edits were innocent or intentional, and when the light finally hits the page, every erased line becomes visible, revealing a truth that refuses to stay hidden.